should be good now. So we're going live. Looks like Dr. Trahan's waiting to get in. And Dr. Lopez.
Ken Strange is trying to get in too. Is he, have you let him in?
I don't see him. He may be trying the wrong place.
Let me talk to him, see what he's doing.
Tell me what it is so I understand.
We do have a quorum now, so I guess we're missing Ken and we're missing Steve. Is that right?
Was Bob Bass going to be here tonight?
I invited him and I did not hear otherwise, but I suppose we could move forward without him. If there were some additional map ideas, then I would prefer to have him here so he could talk about, whether he thinks they're legally sufficient or not. That's always handy. But if we can't if we can't get that answer tonight, then I can run him down tomorrow and get him to either him or get Steve Floyd to help us. So I don't know if y'all have additional ones or if it's just the ones that we looked at already. All right, so Ken says he's in the waiting room. That means he's in the wrong waiting room. So I'm going to send him the invite again.
Oh, okay, apologies. Zoom crashed my computer for some reason.
Not a problem. We're Ken Strange is having some technical difficulties as well, and I'm just resending him the invite. So just so everybody on here knows, we are recording per the usual. We're also live streaming. I don't know that we have anyone watching the live stream, but it's always possible that someone could hop on there and do that. So behave yourselves more than you normally would, I guess. If Ken is actively trying to join, we may wait for just a moment. I took liberty to draw up a really simple agenda, which I can share with you. Basically what we talked about already. We can talk about the timeline one more time. We can have some additional map discussion. I had hoped Bob Bass would be here, and I can text and find out if he plans to join or not, but he's obviously not here now. But then I know you all want to talk about the community meetings, and we had talked about making a plan tonight for that. If you have additional ideas above and beyond what we've already talked about, then having a couple of days to implement those ideas would be great for myself and for my office. So, and that's really all I have tonight. I know I feel like we weren't quite finished talking about maps just yet. And I guess that's ultimately what we'll keep talking about until the recommendations are made and the court votes on it. So.
May I ask what we plan to do? We were hoping that Bob Bass would be here and share some of the additional components, for example, the ethnicities. I guess maybe we should discuss, are we going to need to meet again before we actually go before the community and begin those meetings on Saturday?
I think we need to get feedback from him before the meetings begin on Saturday. I don't know that that means we need another meeting, but certainly he could provide some feedback about whether he thinks one map proposal versus another meets the constitutional muster and the statutory requirements. That's really the essence of what we need to hear from him. So let me text him and find out if he's planning to join.
Thanks, Mark.
Welcome, Ken. Glad you managed to make it on.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. We were just debating whether Bob was going to darken the door tonight, and I have a text out to him to find out if he plans to. I could also call him here shortly if he doesn't respond.
I understand from the live feed that everybody is receiving feedback on the other end, watching the live feed. So we probably need to all be muted unless we're speaking.
Good point. All right, I just reached Bob and he is going to join. I think some of my emails that go to the spam filter catches them, so some people think they haven't gotten the invite when they have. Anyway, I sent it again to him. All right, he's coming in now. All right, so, well, now he's gone. Hopefully he'll be able to get on here. I've made it so that others can share their screens, and if we want to, if and when Bob gets on here, if we want to pull one up, and a map that is, and start talking about it, that might be handy for those viewers of the public who might be watching the live stream.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining.
Sure. Sorry, I got home and I forgot about it, frankly. And then when you called me, I was going, oh, crap. Let me make sure I've got all of my ducks in a row here. All right, go ahead.
All right, well, we have really two main items on the agenda tonight. We have, I believe, everyone here from the commission. The first item would be to continue our discussions on the maps and view any additional or modified maps if they exist from any commission member. And then the other item is probably less relevant to you, Bob, but we want to talk about how we handle Saturday and next week, and whether or not we have sufficient stations for people to come around to at the community meetings and all that. So,
Right.
So I guess let's start with the big one first. Let's continue our discussions on maps. Does anyone have anything you'd like to share on the screen?
I have analyzed both the what was labeled M3, which was for Mark Trahan's plan, And then I also have Steve Myers 2, SM2, that I can put up on, if you'll allow me to share a screen, I can pull that up for discussion.
You should be good.
All right, let's see if,
Did you receive the updated statistics now that I have the ethnic and race data incorporated there?
well, I have the ethnic and race too. I don't know. I can't begin to tell you how many emails and phone calls and maps I've looked at today. So if I've missed an email, if you'll resend it to me, but let me pull up when we get to your turn, you might say. I'm going to pull up M3 first and go over it. And are y'all seeing that screen now?
Yes.
All right. Demographically, the plan comes out at a total deviation of 3.47%. I checked my numbers against Mr. Trahan's, and while we count the population somewhat differently, the numbers matched what he had on his plan data. So getting to the heart of it, I guess, the Hispanic population in precinct 1 under the M3 or the Trahan plan was 54.69% and 46.49% in precinct 2. It leaves the incumbents in place. It's based on VTD. So I think as a legal question, although I would like to see the Hispanic percentage slightly higher of voting age population, I think it is a viable plan. Any questions on that plan? I think y'all saw it and discussed it at some length last time we met.
Could you scroll down, Bob, so we can see the rest of the sheet?
Yeah, I don't know what you're seeing at your end. I'm showing the voting age block now on my screen. I'm not sure what you're seeing.
I don't see the voting age block.
Okay.
We're seeing the top portion of your normal summary where you show the total maximum deviation and the maximum deviation of per precinct, and we're only seeing through precinct 3 when you start breaking down into the ethnic racial data.
Okay, I'm scrolling down on that. Is anything else? It's not moving?
It's not moving. You're either not sharing the right screen or the right window.
Well, I'm not sure how to share it any differently.
Something moved right there. So we
Now
can
it moved.
see now.
Still nothing?
No, now it's moving.
Can you see anything now?
It got a lot bigger.
Well,
Yeah, you need to zoom back out, Bob.
all right.
That looks good. And then we just can't see the left side.
There you go.
All right, it's hard to do without being able to see what y'all are seeing. I can send you this spreadsheet electronically. I don't know if y'all could get it and print it out there. I can email it to Mark, possibly. But anyway, I think this is a viable plan on a legal analysis. Any questions? I did receive a fairly strongly worded critique of my analysis from the League of Women Voters. I'm like I say, I stand by my position based on about 40 years of doing this work, but I'm not sure how many cases the League of Women Voters there in Hayes have litigated, but
Thank you, Bob.
all right, I'm going to close this screen. This is the plan map. Y'all have seen it, so I'm not, I say this, I'm not sure I'm sharing this screen now. I'm going to stop the share and restart the share. So what you're looking at here is the M3 plan as presented. I can zoom in if you want to see any particular area of it, or just before we move on to the SM2 plan, does anybody have a question? All right, I'm going to open up the SM2 plan if I can. Are y'all seeing that screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And I'm going to try to call up the SM3. Well, I don't know.
Whose plan is this?
Steve Myers. And I'm not, I frankly don't know whose plan is who other than by who presents it. I don't know which group espouses it or anything. I frankly don't know the politics, just to put it bluntly.
Steve, is this map different than the map we showed the other day? It looks like this precinct 3 is different.
Okay, I am unmuted. Sorry, I want to make sure I was unmuted. Yes, based on the feedback I got from you, Ruben, and from Mark, and just the general conversations we had, I went back, and this is why this is SM2. What I presented at the meeting we had was SM1. This is SM2, and it is different from the original one, and it left in. What am I trying to say? Oh, it returns several of the precincts of concern in that were in CC3 and had been moved to 1. It put them back into CC3. And as you saw, we got rid of a little bit of the wraparound on the rule. However, I do, on speaking rules, since I just mentioned that, I want to segue real quickly to that. There was a lot of discussion about urban, rural, no difference, etc. From that standpoint, the Census Bureau does actually categorize rural and urban separately and considers them communities of interest. I have been able to do some research and find that, and they do complete census takes and breakdowns based on urban and rural. So they are recognized as having distinct interests from that particular standpoint. But that being said, it was just a follow-up to the conversation we had about urban and rural. That being said, again, Ruben, you had expressed some concerns about a couple of different districts in there, and we went back and remodified and tried to pull those all back in so that they were still in 3, and not concentrate so much on Texas State.
I appreciate that, Steve.
Well,
All right.
you know, this is all about compromise and finding the best for everybody in the county.
And I think you're absolutely right on that.
Can you all see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
What are you seeing there? The upper portion of the spreadsheet?
The upper
Yes.
portion of the spreadsheet, the maximum, where you're doing the deviation, you're over the maximum deviation right now.
Right. So that this plan has a maximum deviation of 3.55%. That's certainly a good, tolerable. Ethnically, going to the voting age population. Can you see the voting age population?
Yes.
Voting age, ethnic, racial data for the precincts. Precinct 1 has declined voting age population of 45.9%. Precinct 2 has been elevated to 53.18%. I think it's possibly a plan that might withstand a challenge if a plaintiff's group were to bring a lawsuit on the basis that precinct 1 has been diluted substantially. It's about 10 points roughly less than the M3 plan in precinct 1. It does elevate precinct 2 to a level, but it's still, in my opinion, somewhat too narrow a majority of voting age Hispanic population. Now, if you combine, which I don't necessarily believe current practice, back in the old days, we used to combine all minorities. And so both 1 and 2 are Anglo below 40%. So that suggests that there's roughly 60% of combined minority voting strength, which would be if all of those voting minorities voted in a block or in a block manner. But I don't think the recent electoral analysis would support such a claim. But I think it is a viable plan, but only marginally so.
Two things I'd like to stipulate on that. First of all, yes, I have looked at the numbers now. I've been able to get the census population data and have it broken down, and my numbers agree with Bob's right now. Quite frankly, I will say this, without having had those numbers before, because we weren't able to get them, now having them, I'm pleased we came as close as we did. Without them, I see there's a little bit of tweaking needs to be done, and we're willing to go back and look and see if we can do that. I do want to recognize the fact, though, for the first time, if this proposal were to pass, for the first time in the county's history, it is close. We'll have 2 commissioner districts that will be both close to or above 50% in Hispanic vote. And so there's some, we're trying to work in the right direction, but I recognize that there's probably some tweaking that can still be done on this. And the third thing I do want to mention is there is 7.21% in CC1, which is the largest block throughout the county of what's considered multi. And that's more than one racial family makeup for the individual. So it could be, Anglo and Hispanic, Anglo and African-American, et cetera. So a mixed background, so to speak. From that standpoint, there is 7% of that, which also helps to, or it tends to skew and lower somewhat the voting age. And that has increased since 2010.
Bob, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act talks about retrogression, talks about dropping the percentage below the majority. And it talks, I know Section 4 was struck down with a formula, but Section 5 is still intact. Am I right on that?
Section 5 has been vacated. That's the pre-clearance section.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Section 2 is still enforceable by private attorneys general. In other words, a private citizen can bring suit under Section 2, and they would use the same rules of analysis that would be used under a pre-clearance review: retrogression, dilution, fragmentation, packing, all of those terms of art. The Supreme Court fairly recently ruled on a Section 2 suit out of Georgia, I think, and held that where the fragmentation or the dilution is minimal, the court said, they did not perceive it being actionable. I don't know what that means, frankly. I don't know. The Supreme Court has not given us much guidance on how little, what constitutes a little bit of discrimination or dilution on a race basis. I don't know the answer to that question. And until there are more cases that explore that, I don't know how to answer your question. But I think both of these cases theoretically could be challenged. I've yet to see what the benchmark from Hayes County was in 2011. In other words, what was the percentage of voting age population in the precincts when your last pre-cleared plan was passed? Mark, do you know anything about where that could be found? Mark Kennedy?
Well, I asked that it be sent to you, Bob, but let me get on the horn here and text.
I don't, without that, knowing what the benchmark is, I'm just sort of speculating based on, like I say, 40 years of doing this work, that it's going to need to be 55% or greater voting age minority population to be considered at all viable.
Yeah, in our phone call, I asked you about this too, and I heard you say that that's even 55% is a fairly, it's a fairly low threshold there. Is that right?
Well, I'm not that comfortable with 55 being treated by this group as sort of a sacred threshold. It's not. It's simply, I think that's as low a number as you can reasonably get and still be considered reasonably viable. And what I mean by reasonably viable is, would a good minority candidate have reasonable opportunities to be elected out of that district? And given the demographic, younger, less registration, less turnout, 55% is the optimal number. If that's assuming they all turn out and vote, that would be sufficient to elect. But Anglo populations don't turn out at 100%.
No.
And Hispanic populations have not demonstrated historically. Hopefully they will someday realize the power of the vote. But so far, this last election, you know, that vote was relatively split between Democrat and Republican presidential options. Now that may be a bad race or office to judge by, but if 30% of that Hispanic vote were to vote for another candidate, well, you know what the outcome is going to be. So I don't know. I can't, you know, I prefer, frankly, looking at numbers closer to 60%, but that's just me. I've drawn plans for 40 years trying to see Hispanic candidates have success, and I've not seen much of it unless those numbers are higher than either of these plans. But again, I will say I've seen very well people that are well known, well respected, win with, you know, even less percentage, but they get a lot of crossover from Anglo, Black, you know, they get a lot of crossover votes. So the right candidate can be elected in a weaker district, but a typical run-of-the-mill candidate with no prior experience in a public office just wants to get into it, run for county commissioner, for example, be tough to get elected with those, either of these plans, I think. Now, that's just my opinion.
Well, realistically, Bob, that's really difficult because I'm just looking at the percentages, the population percentage broken down by precinct. And out of 68 precincts in the county, we have 5 that are over 60% of Hispanic. Only 5 out of 68.
Well,
So I mean, a goal of 60% is statistically impossible.
and that may
Especially
well
when
be
you
the
look
case.
There
I mean,
are 2 and 1, there are 3 and 2. And they're not contingent.
well, let me say too, that one thing that has been a positive development over the years is that all minorities now have more economic opportunity to live where they choose.
Yeah.
Whereas back 30, 40 years ago, there were very stark neighborhoods of minorities that were really even had little choice. People wouldn't sell, literally, so they've faced a lot of discrimination over the years on where they can live, but economically, they're now able to live pretty much wherever they choose to. And the rules of law have changed where discrimination on housing is pretty punitive. So as that population disperses around the county to more attractive locations, it may become impossible to meet that old standard of benchmark dilution. Those concepts may be under some judicial scrutiny. So I'm not, as I told Mark, it's not science, it's more art. And I'm just saying, I don't know that there is a hard number that can be given with any sense of reliability as adequate. I think both of these plans could be adopted. Would they be challenged? I think there's probably a chance either one of them could be challenged. Of the two, the M3 plan may have a slightly better chance of being upheld, but I don't know that. It's just speculation on my part, but it depends kind of on the judge. If a suit were filed, I don't know that a suit will be filed. I hope not.
Bob, we have a couple of folks with their hands up.
Is this how we're going to do it, with hands up? Is that what you want to do, Mark?
Well, you all conduct yourselves, but
All right.
and you all are co-chairs, but normally when someone raises their hand, they want to talk. So how about we let them? I can't believe you raised your hand first.
I would just ask that we be able to see the map again, the Steve Meyer map. So I can see precinct 1 and 2 a little bit closer in.
If it'd be easier, I can share my screen because I've got an ArcGIS map, so we can zoom in and out and do some things.
That would be awesome if that could happen.
I can do the same if you want me to.
And y'all be sure to put your hands back down if you are putting on. Yeah, there you can. All right, and then Dr. Lopez.
Hi, I just was wondering, I don't have this readily handy, but what are, based on the 2020 data, just what those percentages are countywide for each of those breakdowns? Ethnicity.
The ethnicity under the total county ethnicity is 50.43% Anglo, 3.74% Black, 0.25% Indian, 2% Asian, 38.52% Hispanic, 0.06 Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, 0.42% other, and 4.58% multi-race. That's total population. You want the voting age populations?
That would be great.
Yes, please.
The voting age population is 53.34% Anglo, 4% Black, 0.27% American Indian, 2.17% Asian, 35.33% Hispanic, 0.06 Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, 0.39% other, and 4.45% multi-race. And those numbers would hold up across the board because that's the whole county as a whole under either plan.
Thank you.
So the current voting age population Hispanic in precinct 1 is 50.1%. Is that correct, Bob?
Under plan, which plan?
Currently, it's just currently, that's where it is now, right?
That sounds about right. I don't have that plan readily at hand, but
Okay.
that was my concern, that it had dropped down to a bare 50%, barely over 50%.
Yeah, it sounds like that's pretty concerning to drop below, because basically what I understand is that once it drops below 50%, it no longer is considered a Hispanic precinct, meaning that it doesn't have a Hispanic majority in the precinct, right?
Correct.
Okay.
As I said, we used to lump all of the non-Anglo population as minority, and so that would make a minority majority district, but modern case law suggests that analysis is incorrect.
This is just an observation. M3 appears to incorporate boxes 229 and 125 into precinct 1, whereas Steve Meyer's map, SM2, I guess we're calling it, does not. And Bob, the other day when you were showing your proposed map, the first one we ever looked at, I believe you said that the Hispanic population in those boxes to the northeast is a lot higher percentage than you get sometimes even down in San Marcos on the near east.
I don't remember exactly, Mark, but I know adding 229, that box is 87% Hispanic.
229 is 87% Hispanic, and 125, where's 125 is 61.6% Hispanic. But you also, in adding 229, you also have 8,783 as a population.
Right.
Which there you start at that point in time, then you start talking about a lot of these precincts down in 3 that don't have that population to match up to shift out.
Yeah, it's a really big box, probably needs to be split somehow for election purposes, but that's another topic. But it takes several of the smaller 300 series, 100 or 112, 113 series to match that 229.
Issue is it has a very low registration rate. It only has 2,777 registered voters out of 8,783. Now, some of that, it's not necessarily age, because the average age of the registered voters is over 43, but there's probably a lot of children in there as well, because there are a lot of residential neighborhoods, a lot of family neighborhoods there.
Yeah.
Just for information, I believe the boxes normally get split in odd years when they are split, and I think the threshold for mandatory separation would be 5,000 registered voters. Now,
Correct.
when it gets a little higher and starts approaching that, I think is when they address that issue.
Exactly. Yeah, last year 333 was split to 333 and 320, and then 449 was split into 449 and 450, because they both, one was at 5,000, the other one was approaching the 5,000 threshold, so it was kind of a preemptive.
So it doesn't sound to me like this is a viable map, Bob. Is that right? I'm hearing you say that. I mean, I hear that you're talking language like it's kind of not. I'm not clear, but it sounds to me like that's what you're saying.
Well, I'm worried that it takes what has been a historically friendly precinct for minority candidates. Now, I've known Commissioner Inglesby for if she's been in office for 25 years, that's how long I've known her. She's a quality person, and she might be able to win from crossover votes in the M3 plan, but I would venture to say that any other minority candidate might not fare so well. So I think our duty is to draw a plan that isn't personality based, but is more legally founded on what would a reasonable candidate of minority ethnicity have, what kind of hill would they have to climb to get elected? And I think in the SM2, precinct 1 would become less friendly to minority candidates.
While CC2 would become more friendly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but
I mean, the problem we have is we can't reach this mythical goal of 60% when the entire county is at 40%. And we only have 5 precincts that hit the 60% threshold. We want to get as close as we can get. I agree. And I'm not arguing the fact that we can do better, maybe. But I'm simply saying is we have to have realistic goals, because unless we want to start doing islands, which aren't permissible, we can't connect enough votes and make it happen.
I
Well,
think
that's not true. It's not that we can't make enough votes to make it happen, but this, it's just, it's a challenge. I won't argue. Dr. Trahan's map apparently is closer. And so that, obviously we can both get closer, but if we're looking at your realistic goal, neither one of us meets it.
The only way to do it is to take population off the southern western part of 1 down, don't see that area. The problem there is Commissioner Inglesby kind of lives right in this area, right in here, down in that south corner. Mm-hmm. And there's not enough people in those voting boxes down there, really. You'd have to strip out some of the college area and then load in more of the ethnic population on the northeastern corner of where 2 bumps up against 1. You could build, I think, a significant minority majority precinct, but it would probably be at the expense of moving Commissioner Inglesby out of her district. So that's sort of self-defeating if she plans to run, but that's, as I've said before, officers don't have a property interest in the office until they're elected, and then they are vested with property interest that they get to serve out their term, even if their district is altered where they no longer live within it, but then they have to run in the district that they now find themselves in at the next time they come up for election.
Bob?
Yeah.
This is Ruben. Have we considered putting CML and Homes in precinct 1? Right now it's in Walt's district.
Have we considered putting what in?
It's the public housing, which is right by the HEB in San Marcos.
I don't know the city that well to know where you're talking about, Ruben.
It has, that's why I said the big HEB, because there's a big governmental subsidized housing there, as well as on River Road. And I think River Road may be included right now or may not. I'm not sure. But those 2 areas have significant Hispanics in them that would give her additional population. And
Ruben, do you know what precinct that is? Or can you give me Crossroads? I can zoom in. Maybe we can look for it.
I think, well, oh gosh. I really.
One thing you would probably have to do is you'd have to break out of the VTDs and use census blocks to get those numbers up, which.
It's Hopkins and Thorpe Lane is the intersection that you would turn on to get to CML and Homes. And it's close to her district already.
But wouldn't it be easier to pull out some, I know you're always going to split some of these communities of interest, but the university is largely white. And so if you're trying to balance that, move more of the university into 3.
Well, the
What?
university isn't in that plan right now, is it?
Some of
Fine.
it,
Actually, 334, which is in the university, which is right here. 330, precinct 334 is 25.89% white, 28.86% Hispanic, 7.16% African American Black, and 0.19% Asian. The rest is multi. So it's a very high multi area. 413 is similar. 413 and 414 are both, well, 334, 413, and 414 are all more Hispanic than white. You can see those numbers right here.
So Steve, your plan still leaves the university in precinct 1?
The university, yeah, this is the university right here. It's in precinct 1. We've kept one, obviously 111, 112. We pulled out 330 from our previous plan. We pulled out 332 from our previous plan. 317. What else? I think that's it. Yeah, the university area is an interesting anomaly or not anomaly, but it's a different makeup than most of the rest of the county in that there is no real dominant race or anything. I mean, it is literally quarter or 30. It's if you look at the university dominant precincts, it is very multiracial, but it does have slight Hispanic advantage. 413 is 15 points. The rest are 3 to 5 points.
Steve, do you mind moving over to that part that Ruben was talking about? He was saying it was in 4. Would that still be contiguous to 1?
In 4?
Right. Walt Smith has it right now.
Okay.
I saw it earlier, I believe.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I saw it earlier. I think they were saying down Thorpe Lane going north from Hopkins. So, and I believe it was in the green. There you go, right below your cursor.
Right below the, okay, I'll zoom in a little more. Okay, there's Thorpe. You said at Hopkins?
You take a right on Thorpe and it's down the road a little bit to the left.
it says San Marcos Housing Authority. You can see it there, right on Thorpe.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Is
There's
it in green?
just,
Oh, right there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If it had been a snake, it would have bit me. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's
So
already
it
in
is,
1.
the San Marcos Housing Authority is in green, and it's in 414, which is, again, 40% Hispanic, 35% Anglo.
Okay, it's in green. It's in Debbie's district.
It is in CC1. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, and the other one's on River Road.
Okay.
That's box 120, I think.
120?
Yeah, I think that's 120.
Okay, let me go back and find 120.
That's going to be east of 35.
Yeah, this right here, that's 120.
Yeah, so it's already in her district.
Yeah.
The other thing you could do is give her more of Kyle. I know one plan had us going to the center of Kyle because Kyle is largely Hispanic at this point.
Yeah, I had incorporated 418 and 419 in my previous plan into Kyle, which would have picked up this and over here. The problem we have with some of Kyle is 223 is part of Kyle right here, Silverado in that area, and that's where Mark Jones lives.
Oh, he lives in Silverado?
Well, he lives at 223. I'm not sure if it's Silverado proper.
Right.
And it's the same thing as was said previously about 110 down here at the bottom of the county. That's where Ms. Gonzalez lives.
Right.
So, we can't really do anything with that.
One of the problems that we're situations that we're dealing with here is something I brought up the other day when we were up in Commissioner's Court, and Bob touched on it again just a moment ago, is how do you define a Hispanic voter?
By the census.
Let me finish. If you look at the voting trends across the state of Texas, the Hispanic voter is not voting in conjunction with people who live in housing districts. It's not happening. So again, I think Bob said earlier, the Hispanic voter might have a little bit different slant or different definition. So I just want to make sure we're not trying to shove two left feet in a right-hand shoe here.
By the way, I just made a slight change to my map, and I bumped the voting age population of Hispanic votes to 55.1%. So I think using my map as a template, we could make some changes, and that would move us in that direction, Bob, if that's what we needed to do.
Well, I can say that you can tweak maps forever and a day, but eventually you're going to have a map that will get 3 votes on the commissioner's court. So I don't know what that is.
May I ask a question related to the multi-ethnic? You know, is there anything in case law right now that is incorporating that, seeing that? I mean, we have talking about Black, Hispanic, but looking at this multi-ethnic, then that's quite a combination here. I don't know if there's anything that you're seeing that would be a trend in how that might even be incorporated into the Voting Rights Act.
I try to read redistricting or voting rights cases as they're handed down, and there is some talk, discussion in those cases of fairly recent vintage that the old traditional concepts of minority block voting are antiquated and no longer possibly even true. But I'm not aware of any analytical tool to say, okay, out of a group of people who identify on the census as Hispanic, what percentage can we expect to vote Democrat? How many are conservative? How many are liberal? I don't know of any analytical tool that would let you know that. And that's the difficulty. Our society is becoming more and more complicated, and some of the old notions that all Black people will vote for a Black candidate or all Hispanic people will vote for a Hispanic candidate, Henry Cisneros would say otherwise.
I guess that's part of my conversation, or asking about this in this conversation, just piggybacking a little bit on what Bob was talking about. Yes, the census has determined what a category is, but just because that category is selected, we're seeing now over the last 4, 5, 6 years now, that's not going to indicate what that candidate, what those individuals as a block are going to be doing any longer. And I recognize we do need to follow the law. We want to follow what is currently in place. But I guess that's another component of what are we doing then to consider what's happening in this multi area as well, and ensuring that we're doing the right things, but not assuming that every block truly is, because it's an Hispanic block, is going to vote as a block.
Can I share my screen again real quickly? I found an article on the Census Bureau that actually addressed this, and it's got one paragraph that I think would be worthy of everybody to look at.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, I wanted permission first. This is an article from data visualization background. This is an article from the U.S. Census Bureau. The chance that 2 people chosen at random are of different race or ethnicity groups has increased since 2010. And it goes on down, and if you read further down here, this particular section says, we know that cross-tabulating the race and Hispanic origin categories yields a relatively small some other race alone non-Hispanic population, which is a factor we have in there. This is because the vast majority, 94% of responses to the race question that are classified as some other race alone are from people of Hispanic or Latino origin identifying as Mexican, Latino, or other Hispanic origin groups. And this is the census data's own research. And part of what they're doing, if you notice in the 2010 census, they dramatically expanded the number of categories and the number of multi-race opportunities, et cetera, because they're recognizing that this is a far more diverse group, that there's no single group anymore that necessarily encompasses all the voting aspects of a particular named group.
I think you ought to take this argument to the Census Bureau.
This
I'm not sure
is
it's really
their-
relevant
this is
here,
their
but
site.
I appreciate that you're bringing it up. I work with, in my area of expertise, I understand the cross-section between ethnicity and race. And there are overlaps related to ethnicity and race, and then there are separations there. But that's not the way the Census Bureau categorizes the way we look at people and population. So.
Well, it is because the other groups are part of the census tabulation, and they're specifically explaining the definition of other groups in here and the most common use. So anyhow, I just thought that was of something interest since we were talking on the topic, and I'll stop sharing now.
There
Yeah.
are about 126 columns of data, and we only use 16 of them. So the number of permutations of ethnicity is much wider than what we use for redistricting.
At the end of the day, we're looking at, so we're not here all night. We're looking at two maps. There's some variation on each. What you're saying, Mr. Bass, is that M3 is a little closer because at least it hits close to the 55%, which is what the courts are looking at. They're not picking out, are they going to vote mostly Republican or Democrat? They're looking at who identifies as Hispanic. Excuse me. And so if we can pull that map up and see how we can tweak that to match some of these other issues, since it's already closer on precinct 1, would that not be a good starting point?
I think, again, if we were to try to use whole VTDs as I think is the easiest for election administration, I doubt we're going to get, Mark says he got a little better. I doubt we're going to get substantially better. It might be by breaking out of the VTDs, going to the census block level. We might get it up to 60%, but I kind of doubt we'll get over 60% without going to rather extreme measures. The population is just too diffuse.
The other thing we have to take into consideration, we are presenting this to the public, and we are obviously presenting it to the county commissioners as well. And the question becomes, were we chartered to come up with a single plan and kind of basically tell them this is what you have to take it or leave it? Because I'm not sure that's necessarily our purview or our capacity from that standpoint. Or do we come up with two plans that we try to get within defensibility, within as close as possible within the means? We present it to the public, we get public feedback, we adjust them accordingly if we can from there. And then the commissioners ultimately make the decision, not the district.
From practical experience, I've seen a committee recommend a single plan that the commissioners court declined to adopt for, I would say, good reason. And it became a mess. The Citizens Committee was threatening to sue its commissioners court, but only the commissioners court can approve a plan.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that too. I think that the charge that the commissioners court gave us by having each commissioner bring a citizen advisor in was really just kind of a depiction that what they wanted to do was kind of get an overview of several ideas that they could then refine to the plan that they felt comfortable in voting on for this county. So I think it's entirely appropriate to give 2 plans or even more if we have a citizens group that comes up with a plan that they feel is viable, because ultimately it will be Commissioner's Court that'll make the decision on what plan or modification of plans is accepted and voted on by the court.
I actually don't mind the 2 map thing. I think, Bob, you're right. We can submit 2. I just rather us submit things that comport with the Voting Rights Act. And so to make sure that we're on for both of them, that it's not going to be subject to lawsuits or whatever as soon as they're done with it. So trying to get within the law for both of those should be our objective.
I agree. And Bob has just commented that he thought both plans would stand the test. And both plans are subject to some challenge also.
Well, I think both plans are they're borderline plans. I think both plans are within spitting distance of each other. I frankly don't see that much from a legal analysis. Either plan is going to be subject to some challenge, potentially. I think the M3 plan is only slightly better because it preserves a majority district that has been proven to be viable. Like I say, the legal women voters, I'm not sure who that group is, question my analysis, but the question would be, if you water it down any more than it is now, will it survive scrutiny, judicial scrutiny? And that's my concern, is one, in my view, has to be preserved because it's proven it can be viable. If you weaken it, you've thrown its viability into question. So that's why I think the M3 plan is slightly, and I urge the term slightly, better in terms of defendability than the SM2 plan, but I think both could withstand possibly judicial scrutiny if they were challenged. I think either could be adopted and if not challenged, would serve functionally for the future elections. I don't see anything wrong with them on any other level than a very minute analysis of the voting age populations of minorities.
That said, if I may, I would like to suggest that we basically conclude the discussion and take these 2 plans to our public meetings, and let's see what the public has to say about them.
Can I say my hand's been up for a little bit because I've been trying to speak. Are we gonna, my question is, are we gonna disregard the legal woman vote map? Or has anybody looked at that to analyze that? Because they had sent us a letter with a map attached.
I have not attempted to analyze that map. And again, I'm pleading a little bit of ignorance, I suppose, but if that map is presented in a GIS format, I could be glad to analyze it. Looking at a PDF, the time it takes to replicate one is pretty time consuming.
I guess my issue with that is that they've been pretty active the last elections. I can't tell you how many. And they put out a voter guide as well. I'm just a little concerned that we're just disregarding that map because we don't have the additional information. That's why I asked for some kind of standard at the last meeting. If it didn't have exactly what you're asking for, were we going to consider those maps? So I was asking the committee to kind of make a decision as to what maps we were going to consider, because I didn't want you to have to look at 100 maps if they didn't have the proper analysis to them.
Ruben?
And is what we're saying that we're not going to consider any map that doesn't have the relevant information? I think that would be logical.
Ruben, in response to that, I thought I understood we did say something to that effect. that unless it had come from a member of the appointed commission or had the information that we are also reviewing, that we weren't going to consider any other maps that were provided outside of that process.
I don't remember that. I remember Mark saying you should bring that information. But nobody ever said if you didn't bring that information, what was the final
We circulated criteria. I'm not sure, Mark, did the county adopt those criteria, which did include a requirement that any plan submitted be in a GIS format?
Did not have the court adopt that per se, but I think the court expects that the RAC, this body, this commission would put forward map or maps that is in the charter. It doesn't mean that the commissioner's court couldn't consider something presented to them directly from another body. They can come up with their own map for that matter after you all are finished working. I think that, we circulated the League of Women Voters memo to you all so that you could consider it. If you think aspects of it are viable and attractive and something that you'd like to include in the map, then you can do so. The statement I made, I think, Ruben, that you might have heard, is that if we believe, just sort of spitballing it without getting down into the details, that there's some balancing and it doesn't look like it's completely on its ear in terms of legal compliance, we would put it on the website as something that is submitted under the frequent comments section. And it could be there and public can see it, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean that you all are putting it forward to the court for consideration. You can.
The question is, do you take it to the public hearing?
I don't think that, these community meetings are really meant to be a reflection of what you all are discussing and what you all are considering as a proposal to the court, and then just informational. We could have a table that we add. We're kind of getting into our other agenda item now, which is.
No, I would prefer not to see it, to be honest with you. It doesn't have the information attached to it.
I totally agree. I'm not prepared to go and answer any questions about that map, so I don't think that we should put that in public. So,
yeah, it'll be on the website under the comments section. If people want to go there and look at it, they can. For that matter, if the league wants to disseminate it widely, I'm sure they have the means to do so.
I can chime in here too, just to strengthen what my co-chair said in Commissioner's Court when Steve Meyer first presented a map. My co-chair indicated emphatically that he couldn't make heads or tails out of it because there was no detail on it. And we actually took a break for 15 or 20 minutes or something so that Steve Meyer would have time to go back and add detail to it so that my co-chair could see it and feel more comfortable about it. So if we're now talking about a map that League of Women Voters or anybody else presents that has no detail on it, well, that just kind of goes against the grain of this committee because we can't consider it. We don't know anything about it. So I think we ought to just stick with the two maps that we have. And if somebody wants to bring a detailed map with analysis to one of the meetings that we're having, that would be certainly the prerogative of a citizen to do so.
So I think we're in general that they should have all the information if they present a map, or we're not going to consider it. And that was my whole point, same meeting you just spoke about when I brought that up, because I felt like if somebody did bring a map, they should have their information together so that we knew if it met the criteria of the law. So, we couldn't tell whether Steve Meyer's plan met the Hispanic population or the percentage. He has provided that information now. He did a very good job within the 15 minutes to provide all the information. But he's lucky because he's got the map or the program that can enable him to do that. And so I don't know how many people really have that type of program to be able to come up with that census data at a, fingertip. So I'm just in agreement that we should not consider those maps unless they have the information attached to them.
I'm looking at the League of Women Voters map. It does give us a total maximum deviation analysis of about 2.92%, but it does not provide any ethnic data. I assume it's built on VTDs. I suppose I could build one and see how it does if y'all want me to do that, but I'm not inclined to go against both the recommended criteria and the expressed wishes that if the League of Women Voters wants to provide us with ethnic data, we can look at it. Otherwise, I'd say not.
Yeah, I'm like Ken. I don't want to show up and try to answer questions on something I know nothing about. So I would prefer it just not be presented, but that's just me. How does everybody else?
I totally agree with you. I think that we have two maps that we want to present. If somebody else needs to present a map, they need to figure out a way to present that. But our committee has come up with two maps, and I feel more comfortable speaking on both of those maps.
I do too.
And I think
I'm sorry.
the opportunity is available in these next 2 weeks to really receive that feedback. And if they'd like to come with regard to what they've presented and share, well, here's how we differ, to give that comment, to give that information. Definitely we want to hear that from them at any of those community meetings.
Were we planning on visiting about the JP and the constable maps tonight?
It's not on the agenda, but we do have a catch-all agenda item at the end. So you all want to raise it, we can talk about it. So on the finishing the map issue with what we're bringing on Saturday and then next week, I heard Steve Meyer say that he may continue tweaking. I've heard Bob say, let's put them forward as they are. Whatever we do have proposed from this body, we would want ideally by Friday, so that we could enlarge it and mount it on foam core and have it ready. I plan to have one map that reflects the current precincts, and then however many maps you all have in play. Right now it's two. I would have two maps, and that's what we would use as conversation pieces. So now I think that if we put the JP Constable map at the community meeting out there, it might be confusing if we put it up there next to them, but we can probably set it somewhere off to the side and have it viewable, the current one. I think, Dr. Trahan, you had one map that you had with you, but I heard someone say, and I can't recall where I heard it, that you might be presenting another. Is that right? Or is that
Presenting another map? I'm sorry. Did you say, you asked if I was planning on presenting another map?
for JPs and constables? Yeah, is the
Oh,
ad?
no, we had, in my conversations with Bob, I understand that minimal requests have been initiated for changes to those maps. And that there's a conversation that's going on. I understand that you've set up a meeting to have some of those conversations. I had some conversations with the JPs and the constables. There were some micro changes that I felt like were appropriate. And I think that if I recall correctly, Bob said that he didn't have a problem with the changes that I mentioned. So I'm happy to talk about those now, or we can save that. But I just want to make sure, since this is our last meeting before we go to community meetings, that we didn't need to cover that before we moved on.
Well, I have the map here and can put it on the screen if you'd like. We can have it. I don't know if it's possible to have a brief conversation, but we could try. If you want.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Bob, are you
I'm
okay with that?
pretty sure this is yours. Let's pull it up and we'll see.
Yeah, I don't mind looking at it right now, but I'm not really prepared to make any decision on this right now. There's obviously a lot of factors depending
Yeah.
on which of these other maps we select that bear on the travel distance and travel time and so forth that may be a consideration in these, both the JP and the Constable districts.
Do we
You bet, and
know
that's,
do we have any idea what caseload the courts have right now?
That's being prepared for me as we speak. I don't have it right now, but
yeah.
I will have it. And I think, visiting this after we get past our community meetings might be a better bet. But in detail, I don't mind taking a look at it right now, but in detail might be better at a later time.
You bet. Well, yeah, and I've heard, I think, similar sentiments to what you all are saying. I think that there are some minor adjustments that might be desired by those who inhabit the positions now for workload purposes, but those are fairly minor. What I've heard in particular is that there's some confusion out here at near where Hay City Store is, and I believe Dr. Trey and your map might take care of that in one way. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but out here, a lot of folks have affiliated with Precinct 3 and make the call to Precinct 3, but then they're not in Precinct 3. And then likewise, down here, Blanco Vista, the neighborhood there off of Yarrington is in San Marcos, but technically in Precinct 2. And I think they've been talking about reconciling that for purposes of clearing up confusion. But that's really all I heard in my meeting, unfortunately, that I had asked to try to have with them to talk about issues got pushed to, well, I think fairly late this month. That was the earliest they could meet. I'll be quiet now. You guys can talk about it if you like.
There was another issue that Judge Doyle had brought forward, and I haven't had a chance to visit with her, but there's I guess an arm of area that goes up Highway 967 up to Rutherford Ranch West. That's part of the school district. That those kids go to Kyle Buda School District, and yet that's up in Constable District 4 right now. And she was indicating to me she wanted to talk to me about taking a little bit of finger up there to get those neighborhoods up there down into her district, since they go to Beauty Kyle schools. So I'm not really up to speed on that. I just had that general conversation with her, and I mentioned that to my co-chair, Mr. Trahan, and he indicated he didn't think that was a problem at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think we also talked about Blanco Vista. That's a San Marcos address, but it's included in Precinct 2, and moving that neighborhood specifically, and the addresses that are south of Yarrington on I-35 that are also San Marcos addresses into Precinct 1, since they belong to that able as it is. And so I've talked to Judge Moreno and Judge Smith about that, and everybody, and Constable Torres about that as well. And I think everybody that I've talked to so far, I might have missed somebody, but everybody feels pretty good about that so far.
Do we have a timeline on this? I don't even know are we actually going to make a recommendation to the court on this? And if so, what's our deadline?
You can. I think, 10 years ago, the court simply asked the electeds that inhabit those spots of JP and constable how to better balance workloads and then acted accordingly. It was kind of the business end of redistricting, I guess, if you will. But it sounds like Dr. Trahan and Bob Parks are having conversations. I'm having one. I think we can all gather toward the end of the month and compare notes and see if we yes on a map that can be proposed. It sounds like everyone's taking kind of the business end approach on this particular map anyway. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing unless you guys want to keep looking at it. And I guess this could be circulated to the group at some point. I don't think it ever was.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Are we going to present this? Are we going to present this on Saturday?
I was going to show a blow up of the JP and Constable maps as they stand and not kind of confuse matters with any proposed maps on those. I think the focus it's certainly the focus of this group and the focus of most citizens that are going to show up to the community meetings probably have concerns about the commissioners' precincts and less about these. If you all disagree, then, I can act accordingly.
I would disagree to the point that where Bob has a JP that needs some neighborhoods moved over because they're really in the Kyle School District, that needs to get done. And then Judge Moreno is already officiating out of Blanco Gardens, and that needs to get done. It just doesn't seem to me to be viable not to get those changes done now and present them on Saturday, because we are going to have some people there for the JP positions. You have people that are coming for the commissioner's position, the JP's positions. Heck, if we were involved in the state rep race, we'd have people there for the state rep race.
Well, this is the only proposed map I've seen. I haven't seen any others, and certainly we can have them available for people to talk about. I hesitate to blow it up and make it a centerpiece for attention. But
Mark, does this accommodate Bob?
I'm sorry?
Does this accommodate Bob's JP with the Kyle neighborhoods?
Yes, I think so. You're talking about Blanco Vista?
No. I'm talking about Bob's, the JP out of Kyle that has neighborhoods in another precinct right now. Does this accommodate that JP?
Not this map. This is the map as it exists right now. Map would have to be changed.
Right.
Yeah, Mark, can you make those changes to accommodate Bob's JP?
We can. I don't know if I can get the analysis.
I'm sorry, Mark. I'm talking about the other Mark, the Democratic.
okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've already made those changes on a map. So I was going to present them on Monday, but because we decided to wait on presenting those maps, I didn't present them. But frankly, the map is exactly the same with the exception of that change in Blanco Vista. So I have not had a conversation with Judge Doyle. I had put in a call to her, but I had not heard back from her. So I haven't been able to have that conversation, but I do think we ought to do our due diligence to make sure that we have had those conversations before we present maps to the community. It makes sense to me not to muddy the water by presenting maps when we need to have those conversations first. I just think that that's wise.
So you've already done a map that accommodates Bob's JP. The JP and Kyle, the neighborhoods in Kyle.
No, he has not.
Well, he hasn't presented it, but I think he just said he had it done.
I edited my map based on the changes I was planning on suggesting.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm okay with not talking about JP maps until next time around. But I think we need to see maps that are a compromise that accommodate Bob's JP and then accommodates the situation in Blanco Gardens. Because regardless of whether we want to admit it or not, they're already being called out there to magistrate anyway.
So if the agenda or the objective for these community meetings is to gather community data, then I think even just as Mark Kennedy was saying, let's have the current JP map there. We can still collect comments. We can still collect ideas or concerns that then can be brought to our conversation when we bring those maps in.
I'm good with that.
That's a good idea.
Why don't we then finish this meeting by talking about this Saturday? I kind of gave you the rundown of what we planned on having. My office has been putting some materials together already. Statutory information, job description information for the elected positions for the informational area. The maps, Steve Floyd will have blown up once they're finalized. And Steve Meyer, I'll email you just to make sure that you haven't made tweaks to the one you have. And if you do, let me know so that we can be sure that we're presenting the newest version of it if you do make changes. We have
Mark, to help Steve Floyd, I'm glad to share my web map ID, which he could then use directly in GIS and not have to reproduce anything.
that'd be fine. That'd be fine.
Because then he can just take and import my map directly.
Very good. We have.
Oh, and Ruben, to your question, I wrote my software. That's the only reason I have it. I wrote it in the last couple of weeks because of this project.
All right. We have the comments table. We had kind of the idea of having not only resources on the positions that are at stake here, but also legal resources. I hesitate to go too far deep into that because that is quite a rabbit hole, as you've heard Bob express time and again tonight and before tonight. But I do think that having some information about the Voting Rights Act and constitutional information is important. We do have that on the RAC web portal already. So, and then, again, I plan to get up at the beginning of this and introduce folks so that people know who the players are in the room. And when the community comes in, I expect, be in your ears individually. Is there anything you missed talking about the other day in terms of kiosk type placement that you all want to see?
Mark, a couple of things just came to mind for me about this. In the comments table, would it be possible to somehow, I know you said lined paper, but I don't know if it would be good to consider color coding each of the precincts. So maybe we have, pink paper or blue paper for one precinct. That way we know which comments were collected where. And then I'm hoping that perhaps just each of us on the RAC could have a copy of the map, but the listing of the precincts that are in each of those, the voter districts, so that are each of those precincts. That way, if we needed to reference something, then we could quickly have access. If somebody said, where am I going to be in this map? Then we could reference that quickly.
Right, because it's not, some of the ones in the denser areas aren't reflected on the map, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
I think both Mark and Steve's software, their presentation packages show that readily. Mine is a little harder to extract, the voter tabulation districts in each one. Along those lines, do you want to use Mark and Steve's maps produced at a large format, or do you want me to produce those maps? Who's producing the maps?
Steve Floyd wanted to print them in large format, and he was able to find phone cord that's in good enough shape to use
Okay.
for mounting. So I think we're good on that.
All right.
I plan to get to, each location an hour or so beforehand, just to make sure everything's set up. And you all are welcome to join me anytime you want during that time frame. Or show up at 10 for the first one. There's an hour in between. So it's a little bit of a tight window, but I didn't want to have too much downtime for you all who are spending your precious time on the weekend doing this. So I think that's as tight of a window as we could have and still travel to precinct 2.
Now, can I get clarification? Are we getting, here again, it's the other Mark, the Democratic chair. Are we getting your 50% map? Or are we getting the map you presented tonight? Because you said you tweaked that map and got it up to 58% Hispanic.
Yeah, I made some small changes, but I haven't presented that to the RAC, so I don't feel comfortable with presenting that to the community. We haven't reviewed that. They were very minute changes. So I'd prefer to present the map that we presented and discussed before.
Okay, all right.
Mark, remind me when and where these meetings on Saturday are. I have a funeral I've got to attend Saturday, so I'm not sure of my availability.
The first meeting is in San Marcos at Goodnight Middle School. And the second meeting is in Precinct 2 in Kyle, and it's at Hayes High. I can send you, Bob, if you, now I think it's on the RAC website already,
I'll
but
look there. Yeah, I just, this funeral, I feel like I almost have to attend, but I have a duty to be there too, so I don't know which one prevails.
well, I'll tend to be as knowledgeable as you at these meetings.
Okay. I give you that permission to be as knowledgeable.
So I think Dr. Lopez asked if we could get both of these maps emailed to us before the meeting. Is that correct?
That's what, at least before the meeting, so that if we want to print it out, or at least having a printout there so that we can access that for reference for each of us.
Yes, I would just reiterate that request.
I will have both maps emailed to the group before end of the day tomorrow so that you have them well in advance.
And I think I've sent the demographic analysis of each plan to you already, Mark, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, going into these community meetings, I know we have 2 plans. We're differing a bit on where we want to be. I just really am looking forward to and hoping that community members will come out so that we will have some good information to then bring back and make our final recommendation to the commissioners for, so that they really are the ones making the decision. And I think sometimes there's the pressure to feel like we have the right map. I think we really are doing our role in presenting something that we believe will fit within the law, presenting 2 options, and then hearing that feedback. There may be some things that come out of these conversations that are going to provide us some additional food for thought, and maybe they have the magic bullet that we just haven't thought about in our regard. So I appreciate everybody coming together and the conversation even today and Monday about both of these options.
Agreed. All right, well, are we winding down this evening?
Yes.
I think we're done. It's okay with my coach here. I think we ought to adjourn and see everybody on Saturday.
I will, I'll keep working on this, and my office will keep working on this. And if you all have any other ideas that you think are just, undeniable, then, give me a call or give me an email. All right. Otherwise, we'll see you Saturday.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you.
Everybody.